Now, President Jacob Zuma held talks over the weekend with Prime Minister Nicolas Tiangaye of the Central African Republic and other key players of the transitional government in that country. The discussions focus on how to fast-track a measure of peace and stability after a rebel-led coup saw former President Francois Bozize flee the country to neighboring Cameroon. South Africa lost 13 soldiers in that process. Joining us now to explain just how South Africa will be involved in that country is Mac Maharaj. He's of course the spokesperson for President Jacob Zuma. Mr. Maharaj, thank you so much for joining us here on Beyond Markets. Just quickly take us through what is the next step. We know that the leaders were here over the weekend, and of course this was endorsed by the region, the Central African Economic Region, which requested South Africa's assistance back into that country. What happens next?
Well, Karima, thank you very much for having me on. Let me just say that from the outset, the critical problem that Africa as a continent is facing is the problem of unconstitutional change and change by military coups. And the AU has taken a firm position to act in such a way that it dissuades for future coups and it encourages orderly change through democratic means. In the case of the Central African Republic then, we are at a point where what was set up by the rebel movement as taking over of power, disbanding the judiciary, abrogating the constitution, that is put beside now. A transitional executive has been created in keeping with the Libreville Agreement. That executive has appointed Mr. Jotodia as the president, and that the Prime Minister remains the one that was appointed originally during the Libreville Agreement. Mm-hmm. So we have now reached a point where we now recognize that government as a transitional authority who will take the country to elections within 18 months, and we are busy working with it as an authority established in that territory.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, Mr. Maharaj, there are indications that South Africa's assistance is going to be required, and of course we know that that needs to be done formally. Can you confirm for us if a formal request for South African assistance has been handed to the appropriate authorities, whether President Jacob Zuma is considering it, and more importantly, if it requires us sending more troops to CAR?
Let me confirm, first of all, that at the last summit held on the 18th of April, the head of the Central African states made an appeal, and so did many other leaders, to South Africa to remain seized with this car and to support it with troops. Our position has been to take note of all those verbal requests, but we await formal requests. We note the AU was present at that decision taken by the Central African states, and we want to act in a way that is in conformity with all our colleagues and fraternal states. So we are going to approach the matter when the formal request arrives with sympathy and understanding, because it is in conformity with our foreign policy objectives, namely of assisting peace, stability, and development in all countries in the African continent. So we will approach it with sympathy. It is in keeping with our policy objectives that we should support it. We do not know the precise nature of the support we will be asked for, but we will look at it within our means and within our foreign policy objectives.
Mm-hmm. Now, of course, the question of having troops, whether it's for peaceful means or to secure stability for the long-term economic development of the continent, always carries with it the risk of losing lives. And of course, it's not a decision that government takes easily. What are the kinds of things that will go into the consideration, Mr. Maharaj, of sending troops back there again, particularly if one thinks of the kinds of pressures that it will put on the fiscus?
The decision taken by the Central African States Summit, together with the partners in the process, was to assist in bringing about stability there, helping to bring about capacity development, and ensure economic development. Now, the assistance may be wide-ranging, and countries will be called upon according to their means and ability to commit themselves. There is going to be a meeting in Brazzaville, Congo on the 3rd of May, hosted by Brazzaville, Congo, of the contact group in order to look at assistance, particularly in the form of financial assistance for CAF. I cannot preempt at this stage, but I can say that when it comes to the requirements of the security sector, and there is enough information to indicate a state of lawlessness in the Central African Republic, that what would be required would be assistance from the armed forces of different countries, and that wherever an army exists in a country, it exists on the basis that their job is to defend the state and the state's interests. And that involves possibility of loss of life. That is an inherent risk when anybody joins the army.
Well,
but we do not take that risk lightly. And we will do everything to ensure that if we do anything, it is to safeguard our troops, to ensure the success of the mission, and to ensure the objectives of peace and stability in Africa.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Maharaj. That is, of course, Mac Maharaj, who is the spokesperson for South Africa's President Jacob Zuma, explaining just how South Africa will be involved in the Central African Republic following a recent coup that led to a change of government there.